It's very common to want to trigger some JavaScript to run, but to run later, to call a function after 60 seconds or to call a function every 5 seconds. And we use timers for these. Slideshows would use timers, clocks would use timers, and there are lots more uses for them. While timers aren't officially events in JavaScript, they can feel a little bit like it, so we'll talk about them here. Really, there are only 2 methods that we're interested in. I'm looking at a little bit of code here, but there's nothing to do with timers just yet. I have a function defined called simple message, and I'm going to add just a call to set timeout. We can just call set timeout directly, the same way we could call alert or console.log. It's always available. And all I need to give it is 2 things. The name of the function I want to call, in this case, simple message, comma, and the interval. Now, set timeout is used in milliseconds. So if I want it to, say, pop up 5 seconds later, I'll put in 5,000. Finish that statement. We can ignore anything that's below it right now. It's not being used yet. I'm going to save that, and I'm going to refresh the page that I'm on that's actually using this. Open that up, and in hopefully about 5 seconds, we get the alert box. Yes, I agree, not very exciting, but it proves the point. Now, when I use set timeout, it just happens once. It hits that line of code and says, I'm going to do this once, and that's it. We also have a different one called set interval. Set interval takes exactly the same format, but it repeats it. In this case, set interval will call the function called change image every 5 seconds. Now, what do I have going on here? Well, just to break it down, what I'm doing is on line 10, I'm grabbing hold of an element of the page called main image. And if I look at the HTML here, all I have is that main image is a regular image tag in the main section of my document. So I'm grabbing hold of that so I can change the source of it. On line 12 and 13, I'm creating an array using the shorthand format within the square brackets, and all I'm putting in it is 6 paths to images. And these are just some images I have locally in the underscore images folder that I have here. I've gone through and manually entered these. And what I'm going to do is rotate around them. So I'm creating my own little index here, which I'll set at position 0. And then in my function called change image, I'm going to reach into that image and set its source attribute to whatever the current contents of the array are at the current index. So the first time we call it, it'll say, well, my index is set to 0. I will grab the image that's called overlook.jpg and just add that entry to the image tag. Then we add one to the image index. We check to see if the index is larger than the length of the array. It isn't. And so I'm done with the function. But set interval is still ticking. And in 5 more seconds, it's going to call change image again. We then grab the second element. We change the attribute. We increment the index. And we just keep going. So if I save this, go back over to my page, and hopefully after about 5 seconds, we change to one image, we wait a few more seconds, it'll change to the next one, and as we watch it would keep going and just start to loop around. A very simple use, and all we're really doing here is the set interval. But both set timeout, which is the single one, and set interval, which is the repeating one, have their mirror images, the ability to both clear timeout and clear interval. So just because we start something repeating doesn't mean we always want to go on that way. The question is, how do we do it? Well, here's the interesting thing. When we call set interval, and I'm just going to bring it up a little bit so I can see more to it, this function actually returns a value. And I'm going to store it. I didn't care before, but now I do. I'm going to create a new variable called interval handle. That's as good a name as any. And it's just going to be a variable that connects me to a little bit of memory that says I understand what this interval is doing. What I'm then going to do is say when somebody clicks on the image, so I'll use the myImageOnClick event equals function, just a small anonymous function. I'm going to call, instead of set interval, I'm going to call clear interval. passing in that interval handle, the variable that was returned from calling set interval. Now you might think, well, what does that do? Well, it allows me to create this ticking clock, this set interval. And if I want to, pass that value right into clear interval, and it knows which one to clear. And the idea of this is I could have multiple intervals kicking off in my JavaScript. I don't want to clear all of them or none of them. I need to know one at a time. So I'll save that, jump back over and open my page again. And we should have the ticking clock going on. The set interval should be refreshing this image every 5 seconds. But if I click on it, single click, I'm not asking for any feedback, but that set interval should now be cleared. And as you notice, the picture is not ticking over anymore. And that is simply timers in JavaScript. Working with timers in JavaScript really boils down to those 4 methods. Set timeout to perform a single action after a delay. Set interval to repeat it after that delay and just keep on repeating. And their evil twins, clear timeout and clear interval.